thought it'd be best for me to make a video to give you a little background as to where I come from and why I'm so adamant about truth. Why am I so concerned about preachers and teachers who teach falsely? Well, mainly because of my own personal experience. I too came from false teachings, incorrect leaderships, and all these things. And I want to be able to share this with you to give you some understanding and to let you know why I'm so compassionate concerning this topic. See, on Prescribed Truth, we're going to be centered around teaching truth and refuting a lot of the lies that are out there. And I don't want you to think that I'm out here just trying to bash people and trying to run down the church or run down other people's churches. I want you to see that I myself have gone through these things, and I want to be able to help somebody else if I can to come out of it. Now, I grew up agnostic. My parents took me to church. My mom took me to church from the time I can remember. But that doesn't mean I believed. I remember being baptized at 8 years old just because I wanted to take part in the Lord's Supper. No regeneration in my heart whatsoever. In that church, the doctrine was if you were baptized and a member of the church, you can take part in the Lord's Supper. When I turned 17, I stopped going to church with my mom's, and my mom was okay with it. For the next 3 years, I would not be going to church. I would be doing my own thing and going further into my sin. I was a habitual liar, and I was very lustful, and I was a thief. I wasn't as bad as I could be, but I wasn't good at all. It wasn't until I turned 20 where I got caught up in some mess where I kind of betrayed the trust of a friend of mine. And all my friends at the time kind of distanced themselves from me and was like, you can't trust Jamal, so let's back up. And so when they did that, I kind of realized, like, man, I'm jacked up. Like, dang, how can you be so bad that people just like don't want to be around you, right? I realized, like, man, I need to go to church. But that was the first thing I thought about. I just need to go to church. If I go to church, I'll learn how to be more moral, and I'll learn how to be a better person. Because obviously I'm very immoral, and I'm not a good person. I'm a bad person. I would eventually join another church. Whereas I got introduced to this pastor because I did music and I recorded and I wrote. And this pastor had his own studio within his home. And I was introduced to him because of that fact alone, because he had a studio. But when I got there, he gave me a sweet deal that I couldn't pass up. He told me that if I can come to church on Sundays, then he would allow me to record in his studio for free. I felt like I needed to go back to church at this time. During this time, I was going through a lot within my mind, and I needed help with some things. And I felt like going to church was the best thing for me. I just didn't know where to go, and I didn't want to go back to my mom's church because a lot of them people there were older, and I felt like there was nothing there for me. And so now this guy, he comes and gives me this offer about coming to a church, and I get to record, and I feel like God is now giving me a sign. So needless to say, I joined. Now, the worship in this church was different than anything else that I've ever seen before. I mean, people were running around and crying and screaming, laying on the floor and all these things. And I thought it was awesome. The people just being free, right? People were enjoying themselves. Even the children were liking it. It was just nice. Now, the people in this church were about my age. There were people in their late 20s all the way down to their teens, and not including the children who were their babies and all. Everybody seemed close. When I came through the doors, people welcomed me as family. And that's how the church was. We was like one big family. The teachings, I didn't understand anything from right from wrong at this time, so whatever the pastor was preaching on, I agreed with. And like I said, I signed a contract to be at this church, and therefore I'm going to be at this church. I'm going to hold to my word. And so whatever he was teaching on, I just took it as a goal. I knew nothing concerning the Bible. I knew nothing concerning the scriptures. And therefore, I just took him at his word. I would go through the word, and as long as I can see the same words he was saying there, I'm okay with it. I knew nothing about context. I didn't care about exegetical teaching and all those things. As long as what he's saying is there, I'm okay with it. So when he started preaching on the sign gifts and apostles and prophets and all these things, I'm like, well, it's in the Bible. I see them there. I see apostles there. I see prophets there. I see signs there. I see wonders there. I see gifts there. Therefore, I believe them, and it's true. I remember back then where we was going through this 10-day fast. And during this time, we would meet up in the mornings, like 6 o'clock in the morning, to do prayer. And we'll come back later as well, that same day, and have worship together. And it was during this time that my parents were realizing that I was always going to this church. Every day I'm at this church. And my parents were kind of worried and concerned. It was like, why are you there so much? Now, me, I'm kind of blown away. I'm like, well, I used to be out in the street all the time, and no one better than I. But now I'm at this church, and for long periods of time, now everybody's going crazy. So I felt like my parents were basically just against me. I would go to my pastor at the time and I would say, man, my parents are tripping. Like now they get mad at me because I'm at this church all this time and they're telling me that they feel like something's wrong with the church. And he went by the title of an apostle. And so the apostle would tell me, well, your parents, the reason why they're against you is because they're not in the will of God. And therefore, he'll quote to me the scripture. He said, Jesus said himself that who is my mother or my father, but them that do the will of God. Now, he misquoted this scripture. This scripture actually says, who is my mother or my brother, but them that do the will of God. So the verse was taken out of context, but given to me as an advice concerning my parents. And so now I'm looking at my parents all wrong. I'm like, well, they're not doing the will of God, and therefore, who are they to me? And so now I've seen that this family, this church body is my family, and that all my other relatives who aren't doing the will of God are not my family. And that is how it was. And as harsh as that may sound, as wild and crazy as that sounds, you got to understand a lot of us in this church were very loyal to the pastor. And you would say that we were brainwashed. I don't know what all it takes to brainwash somebody, but I do know it takes a lot of manipulation. But the word of God that was used against us during this time was to have us more loyal to him and to serve him more. Now, while I was there at this church, I would be his armor bearer, and I would end up living with him. Now, I was given an ultimatum at the time. My parents were very concerned with me, and they told me, well, you're either going to live in this house, abide by these rules, and leave that church, or you can get out. And I chose to get out. So they really didn't kick me out. I chose to leave. The pastor would offer his home for me to come stay in. I felt like, man, that was a cool pastor. He would allow me to stay with him through this situation I'm going through with my parents. And so he took me in. Now, there's a lot of detail I can go into about the time that I stayed in his home. Really, it was just a struggle because of I slept on the futon. I slept in the studio room where there was no insulation. So during the times it was really cold, I froze, and the times that it was hot, I burned. So other than that, that was it. I made my bed and had to lay in it. I left the comfort of my home to eat like a swine, like the prodigal son did, right? So now this will happen. As I'm staying with the pastor, and I'm his armor bearer, and I'm serving him in that way, I was also the media guy, so I would be doing all the recordings, video recordings for the church. These are things, as you can see, I love video work, and so these are things I put in practice even in those days. Now, a lot of those videos I still have today, and I haven't gotten rid of, for the simple fact that I keep them for sentimental value for myself, to remind me of where I come from. Now, we're going to this church. There was a lot of things that, if I was looking back on now, that I see that was very heretical. But during this time, I didn't know any different. I learned about laying hands and all these things. And the one thing that I found myself wanting to do was I just desired to be a powerful man of God. Like, that was the thing. I want to be a powerful man of God. I want to be one who would come and you would be sick, and I just want to lay my hands, and you just be, boom, I'm healed, right? That's what I wanted. And that was it. I wasn't concerned with souls. I just want to see people healed. I want to see people healed. I want people see set free from demons. I want to see demons cast out and all these things. And not really think about eternity. I'm just thinking about the right now. Like, you got a demon now, I want to see it out now. We'll work on salvation later, but just demon out, get it out, Now, also, one of the things that he used to teach us was that when it came to relationships, and especially seeking marriage, that we will always go through him for counsel. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to leadership for counsel in the church concerning someone you may want to date or any of those things, and talk to them about those things, and hopefully to give you sound doctrine and sound advice. But in this case, it was more so where we were going to him as a mediator. We would have to come to him and either sow a seed or depend on him to pray to seek God on our behalf, whether or not the decision we was making was in the will of God or not. For what it was worth, during this time, this early stages of me going to this church, I believe the pastor was being very sincere in what he taught. I don't ever think that he was thinking at the time that he was deceiving us. I believe that he was sincere, that he was really telling us what he believed was the truth, right? It would be later on until I would end up leaving his house because of the fact that I couldn't really take care of his home the way I was supposed to, because I was living with him and I was staying there. I was under his rules. So I couldn't really do the things he would want me to do, and so he ended up kicking me out. When he kicked me out, I went to stay at a friend's house who was another member of the church, and the pastor, the apostle, called him to tell him that because he kicked me out of his home, that I'm not allowed to stay at the other guy's home either. Now, this may seem harsh and this seems a little petty, but this is what happens. We were loyal to the apostle. And because of that, this friend of mine, we're friends to this day, he had to tell me graciously that I had to leave. I asked him to give me a week, and he gave me a week. Now, during this time, I'm still at odds with my family. Me and my parents are still kind of butting heads, but my dad was happy at the fact that I was no longer living with the pastor, and he was happy that I was trying to get my own place, and therefore he pitched in and helped me get my first trailer. And living with this trailer, probably the best thing that happened to me, as in I wasn't around, I wasn't in the in crowd anymore at the church. I was no longer a part of the inner circle. Things would be going on. People would have parties and get-togethers, and I wouldn't be invited to them, or I wouldn't care to go. I started to be more distant from everyone at that point, more to myself, and just going to church, going home, and I may help out, I may give people rides home, but that's about it. Going home and taking care of my trailer. And no accountability, especially now that I'm living on my own. There's no one there who can hold me accountable to my wrongdoing. And later on, I would get a roommate. One of the other members of the church would come to stay with me. He was having problems with his home as well. It was a thing where a lot of us who were living with family members were at odds with them because of this church. Our family would see that something's wrong with this church and would not agree with us being at this church. And as children would, or kids, or the children of the parents would be in rebellion against the parents and siding with the pastor. And that's just how it was. But people like myself and a guy who would room me, we were old enough to stay on our own. Some people weren't. They would have to stay with their parents or obey what their parents said. And it was good for a lot of them. A lot of my friends that I invited to come to this church at the time, parents told them not to go anymore. And because they had to obey by their parents, because they were young, they were under 18, they had to stay at home. And now I look back at it, I'm thankful for those parents. So, but as time went on, the church didn't really grow as much. And it's one of the times where the pastor had more than the members did. The members were struggling. There were times where the members were living together, 2 or 3 families living in one roof. And that was how it was. We pitched in, try to help each other out. And the pastor, he lived okay. I think there became a turn in the ministry where the pastor, he began to realize that he wasn't too satisfied with how ministry was going for him. So he began to teach on things that weren't true, that wasn't right. Now, we didn't know the better. We was thinking it was okay. We worshiped him. We followed him. We was loyal to him. We lifted him up. He was as our God. He would tell us how he's the closest thing to God that we'll ever get to. He was our pastor. We can't see God, but we can see him, and therefore he was the closest thing to God that we'll see. And we just needed to be able to serve him, and we would please God in serving him. So there were people who would come and fellowship with us and preach with us and have conferences and revivals. But not one time would anybody tell us or let us know, hey, you're kind of worshiping the man and not worshiping God. Except for one man. One pastor would come and tell us the truth, but I will get to him later. Now, what I'm going to talk about next is a touchy subject. And gets me emotional sometimes. So I'm if it seems like I'm rushing through it, because I'm trying not to get too emotional. There's a lot that went on during this time that is kind of hard for me to get into detail about. But on the basic sense, the pastor would get into a lot of sexual immorality within the church, and there would be a lot of debauchery as far as abusing of alcohol and weed smoking and all these things. And he would use scripture and twist scripture to try to fit his motives and to fit his sin. And we didn't know any better. Any of us who probably questioned any of these things probably was so caught up in it ourselves, we may not even too much cared about it. Like I said, I enjoyed being on my own. I enjoyed the fact that nobody was there to hold me accountable. I was in my own sin. So whatever was going on around here, that seemed off to me, as far as the weed smoke and all this stuff, hey, to each his own. Now, at this church, there were times when we had good times. There were times when there was so much love and so much care for one another that, it was like a family. So I don't want to make it seem like all of this church was bad. It was some things that were just so good about it, where it just made the bad seem like it was like non-existent. There were a lot of false teachings that was going on that was evident to others. There was a pastor who would come and tell us that we were worshiping his brother. He was a pastor himself, and he was telling us the truth. He was saying, you're in idolatry, you're worshiping my brother. And God said he'd have no other gods before him. And we listened to him, and we believed him. But then his brother would come back from his vacation at that time to let us know that we were foolish for listening to his brother, and that we should continue to serve him how we've been serving him. And we would listen to our pastor. At the climax of everything that took place, we would have a meeting. The pastor would hold a meeting. This was October 1st, 2010. I'm kind of speeding through a lot of stuff. But October 1st, 2010, the pastor would have a meeting, and he would confess that he was teaching some things falsely. He would confess that some things that we were in practice in the church were wrong, and they were going to change some things. Now, in hearing him say these things, you had to be there, but it wasn't sincere. Like, you can tell it wasn't sincere. You can tell that he may not have meant it all. He probably going to change some things, but he wasn't really making a complete turnaround. He was kind of set in his way at this point. The sad thing about this is that I don't know what took place in his heart between now and what I'm about to tell you. But I do know that at that meeting, he did apologize for what it's worth. It just didn't seem as sincere. At the end of that year, the church would be going out of town on a Florida trip to a conference that the pastor would be preaching at, a revival. I would be working at that time, and along with other few members. We were working that day and could not go on the trip or go on this ride with them. But this day in particular, the van would flip, and the pastor, along with 3 other people, would die. Now, it wasn't until this situation, until this happened, that the church split. When the accident happened, a lot of us was left confused. Our pastor, he would teach that God wouldn't take him out of here until he finished his work, until he finished doing what he had to do. And he would preach and prophesy and say things like, if God doesn't bring it to pass, I won't preach anymore, or I can't, or I won't die until these things take place. He would speak those things. He would say those things. And when he died, now we're looking crazy because it's like, man, this man who says he won't die until this happens is now dead. And we are left without a pastor. And because he was the only one we trusted, and he was the only one that we were loyal to, a lot of us was left confused into what we would do next. What would come of us next? Who would teach us next? Who's going to lead us now? Because our leader is gone. This time, now, as I found out a lot of things that was going on during that time that was wrong, and there was things that was ghastly. Things that were just so despicable. And as I found out these things, I questioned whether God was really real, because the same pastor who I trusted and was loyal to, now finding out that he lied about a lot of things. But he's now dead, and he can't defend himself, and I can't question him anymore. So now I'm left confused what to believe and who to trust. But the Lord dealt with me during this time, and I say that, and I don't believe I was saved at this point, but I believe the Lord dealt with me to show me that there is such thing as truth, that God is true, and I just need to find someone who can teach me the right way.